what we're going to do today, just a quick review of where we're going to be. We're going to start out with a panel discussion about sort of big picture, what is happening across the state, and really to grapple with an issue that is a very complex issue. You know, there's not just one single thing happening, there's a lot of things happening. It's kind of a perfect storm. So Ellen Taylor, my boss, is going to moderate that discussion. Then we will take a break after that panel, and then panel 2, we're going to sort of drill down into things happening that are more relevant, specific to our industry, the forest and wood products industry. So there are some workforce projects, programs happening that could be very relevant. So we want to make sure we talk about them. It's not exhaustive, and I know that there is actually a lot of things happening or a lot of resources that aren't necessarily going to be on these panels. So the third session is really going to try to capture all of that. We're actually going to map it out online. We're going to use an online whiteboard to really look at what's happening out there, make sure we've captured resources that are available, but then really looking at, so where is the gap? You know, are there gaps, and who might be able to fill some of those gaps? So that's what we're going to do today. Any questions before we turn it over? No? I think we're good. All right, so Ellen, I'm going to send it over to you for the first panel.
Thank you. All right, so let's see, because I'm not sure. Yeah, I need to be able to see. This is good. You can see me. Hopefully, the folks online can see me. Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here. So excited to be in person. I really love facilitating and leading group processes, so it has just been a drag the last year and a half to have to do that online. So I am just thrilled to be able to help with our conversation today. I just wanted to indicate that while I'm the executive director of the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, I also serve on the statewide Workforce Development Board. So I have been spending a lot of time trying to understand the workforce development system as it is for many years. And so I'm also able to bring all of that into the room for our conversations today, and have worked with many of you in this regard. So there's a lot of angst out there. Like almost every meeting I go to that has businesses in particular, like everyone's like, oh my God, I can't get workers. Where is everybody? Like what's going on? So I thought it'd be helpful if we just like land a little bit on what are all the causes and conditions that are happening right now amongst us that are very real, and that you are not alone if you're an employer. And I'm an employer. I might be a nonprofit, but I have 11 employees. So, and we're hiring right now for a position. So I go through this just like everybody else that is an employer. So as we've heard a lot about, there are major demographic shifts happening, whether it be low birth rates here in Vermont, we're just not having as many babies as we used to, whether it's an aging workforce, we have a lot of people reaching retirement age, and there's also been a real lack of succession planning, or an understanding of how long it takes to be thinking about and putting in place what you need to put in place if you're going to, say, sell your business to your employees, or whether you're going to sell it to some other Vermonter, something like that, or pass it on to your own kid that's coming along. It takes time. So so there's been a lack of planning overall, sort of on the macro level. Then, of course, with COVID-19, there's been a lack of reliable childcare and health and safety concerns. People that are maybe have to be able to stay in a bubble because they're supporting their elderly parents who are immune compromised, for instance. Then you have this new thing called the Great Resignation. And as people stayed at home and they got like in touch with themselves, they had more time, they weren't commuting 2 or 3 hours a day in some cases. If you work in Boston and live in New Hampshire, for instance, crazy, then you had a time to think like, do I really like my job? So we have seen, and this is happening all across the country, not just here in Vermont, is people are just leaving their jobs. Even ones where their employer thought that that employee was relatively happy. But people are moving. There's a lot of career switching happening. There's a lot of people saying, you know what, I got trained in this, but what I'm really passionate about is this other thing. And because of COVID and like this existential crisis of like, am I going to get it and die? Like, should I be doing stuff now with my life? Because you just never know. So there's a lot of just churning and shifting happening. Then there's a lot of people that were laid off that are going into business for themselves. I've seen a couple reports that are saying that the rate of new entrepreneurial startups is similar to after the World War II. So there's a lot of people that are just like, screw it, I don't want to work for somebody else. I want to try this out for myself. They're having an online business or whatever. I don't have to leave. I don't have to answer to anybody. So like that's going on out there. Then there's a lack of, and then a little bit closer to home, what we see is that there's a lack of connectivity, I think, between employers and the career and technical education centers. And this is relevant particularly to this industry because it's so much working with your hands in so many ways. And there's a major challenge that we have with our CTEs, which Jay Ramsey will speak to, I'm sure, is that the funding formula for how CTEs are supported in our state has been needing to be changed for a long time if we're really going to invest in and strengthen the cohort of young people that come through the CTEs. Then there's also some cultural bias of parents and guidance counselors to steer kids away from the trades and into four-year degrees. And I think, and not understanding that there's actually really good money to be made and really good careers to be had in this industry in particular. And then there's just an overall skills mismatch for current industry needs. So again, it links back to some of the issues of kids going through colleges and getting like a food systems degree or a coding degree, and not even thinking that, oh, there's a whole bunch of plumbers and pipe fitters and skid operators and just like CNC operators that are needed. Like, so what we're training for, or what kids are getting trained in and where the jobs actually are, there is a mismatch going on. And then if that wasn't enough, a few more, there's a high demand for consumers for wood products that are happening. You know, everybody was staying home. We always heard about how people were updating their houses. They were doing renovations projects. So we've heard from some furniture manufacturers that where they used to be able to supply things in, say, 6 to 8 weeks, it's now 3 to 4 months. So, like, there's just that pressure, and part of it is a lack of workers, and part of it is just increased demand for the products. There's difficulties with planning for supply chain disruptions. There's all these things that are unknown, right? There's the parts that are that you thought were coming that you found out all of a sudden aren't. There are challenges getting trucking for your products in some cases. There's issues around container shipments from China and other places that, again, part of that supply chain. And then there's this growing awareness that wages have been stagnant for way too long. And so and with a short labor supply, we are seeing upward demand on from workers for higher wages, better benefits, and in particular, coming out of the pandemic, an improvement in workplace culture. And this is very much connected with millennials and Gen Zers who really want to be working for companies that they have a strong values alignment with, and who really feel like they are valued and that there's some upward potential for them. And if not, they're gonna jump. So if the workplace culture is not something where they can feel engaged and they feel supported and that there's professional development opportunities, it's going to be harder to retain this next generation of people. And then bottom line is there's a high demand for workers, and there's this overall worker shortage across all industries. So this industry, the forest products industry, is thus having to compete with every other sector of the economy looking for workers. So hence, you are not alone, and this is a really challenging time. So the bottom line for me, sort of a piece of advice for all the employers in the room is you're gonna have to change your approach to recruitment and retention, and you're gonna have to consider changes to your workplace culture, and you're gonna need to get more involved in the education system and thinking in terms of talent pipeline development. It used to be that you could just count on the education system churning out enough workers for you to be able to find what you needed. Those days are gone. I don't see them coming back anytime soon, if ever. We're in a different environment, and thus it's going to require all of us who are employers to shift how we function as employers and our interaction with people who are looking for work. So with that, I hope that doesn't depress you too much. It's a big deal. I just wanted to really validate, like, we're all feeling this angst, right? We're all in this, and it is a different time, and so we all have to think more creatively about how to navigate forward. So I'm gonna turn this over. We're gonna move now into panel one, and we have a number of really great panelists. And what we're going to be what we asked each of them to do is to provide a sort of a higher level, state level picture of some programs that are available to this industry. So you're going to hear, I'm going to skip introducing Tristan, but first you're going to hear from Cindy Robillard from Department of Labor. You're going to hear from Maureen Hebert from Vermont Technical College, who runs the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development Department. And then you're going to hear from Jen Stronson here in the room, who represents the RDCs. And the intention of this panel for the next hour is to get a broad view of the landscape of what's out there, and we'll have time for Q&A. And then, as Christine said, panel two then, after we take a very short break, will be about getting into a little bit more of the specific projects or initiatives or programs. We have a number of those kind of service providers here in the room who aren't on the panel. So we're going to be saying, hey, Marianne, tell us a little bit about the Talent Pipeline Management Program a little later on, just to give you a forewarning. But first, before we do all that, I thought in the spirit of, again, sort of orienting us to the workforce development system as it is today, I wanted to have Tristan Tolino walk us through. And Tristan, I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to make you co-host right now, or host.
Although I don't,
so that
actually, I don't have that slide deck. I have the mural, and I'm ready for that, but I don't have the slides that you created. So why don't you hold share till we get through the slides, and then hand it off when we go to the mural.
Thank you for remembering that. That was a brain fart on my part. Okay, so Tristan's going to walk us through some big picture on the system so as it is. We have you all are in essence guinea pigs today, in that we have some visuals that nobody besides a handful of people have seen yet. So we're going to be trying this out on you to see if it's actually helpful. So, but before that, I want to introduce Tristan, who is a state representative from Brattleboro and is on the State Workforce Development Board. So go ahead, Tristan.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just add a couple pieces. I've been on the State Workforce Board for 6 years or so. Prior to that, was part of at least one or two legislative initiatives to understand our workforce system. I had 25 years in the food service industry and consider myself to be, even as I've evolved my career recently, very much a person who spent my life in the trades and kind of acutely aware of some of the cultural gaps around how people perceive the trades and how we develop talent for the trades. I currently sit in the Appropriations Committee in the House, and to the extent that we have sort of divided up our responsibilities for the getting a deeper dive into the budgets, I pay extra attention to the Department of Agriculture budget, and also Agency of Commerce and Community Development. So much of our economic development budget work and ag and forest products. And I've served in the Agriculture Committee 2 or 3 years over my almost 10 years in the legislature. I was moved in and out, so I apologize. I can't remember exactly how many years. The slide you have in front of you is an attempt to just make sense of where we are, and recognizing that in the ideal world for employers, these boxes in green, you'd have really high workforce participation rate, a large percentage of your population active in the workforce. Wouldn't hurt to have also people who are not in the workforce but want to be. So the percentage looking for work, which is a number that, there's a version of that we often refer to as the unemployment rate. And actually not have that many other people currently out there in the environment trying to recruit for positions that they have available. And the 3 green squares are designed to sort of highlight that would be an ideal world for employers that would give you the largest available pool of talent with the least amount of competition. Unfortunately, we're in a scenario that works much more in favor for employees to exercise their autonomy in the workforce system, because we're facing quite low workforce participation rates. That number has been declining, and then the pandemic, with the Great Resignation and people opting out, we're seeing thousands of people not actively participating in the workforce and not looking for work. So you have low unemployment rates, meaning not many people who have no jobs looking for work, and then also lower than normal or ideal workforce participation rates. And at the same time, you have a high number of jobs available, or people are trying to recruit to. So you have a very challenging environment for employers across all sectors, and it's powerfully impacting our ability to rebound from the pandemic economically, but also really defining what thriving looks like in our future Vermont. I think we can go to the next slide. And of course, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but there are other constraints that are very powerful in their impact on workforce participation and all kinds of decisions that people are making. Lack of worker affordable housing. Housing is a huge issue in a number of different parts of the state, as far as being able to encourage people to come in who might not currently be in the workplace to move into your area to address your workforce needs. You need to have available housing. Lack of childcare, or the cost of childcare, lack of broadband, lack of public transit for rural communities, just the overall impact across much of the state of being so rural, and how that feature of who we are makes certain parts of the workforce system much more complicated. And so I think, Ellen, now you're going to hand it to me from Mural, right?
Yes.
And before I actually share screen, once I'm host, I will say, just by way of background, as Ellen said, this is our first time sharing this with a sort of a public audience. But I want to share just a tiny bit of the backstory of what we're doing and why. It's always very complicated to understand a system as distributed and complex as a workforce system. And frankly, from the legislative point of view, I think I said this in my bio, that I've been part of multiple attempts from the legislature's side.
Kristen?
Yep.
Kristen, your audio is cutting in and out a lot.
I don't know why that would be.
Either try. Okay, that's a little better. Go ahead.
I'll see if it was which camera I was using. If it persists, please let me know.
That's better.
Okay. So the legislature has a responsibility for designing and with the administration and everybody else in partnership, but still ultimately designing the system. And we've grappled with trying to understand, well, what is it? And frankly, those efforts over the last number of years have not been very understandable. And so Ellen and I set out to try a different approach. We're using a tool called Mural. You'll see it shortly. Mural is we're trying to sort of visually represent at a very high level, kind of a zoomed out level, what is the system that we have, and understand it, and invite you honestly to share from your lived experience of like, oh, where have we had successful interactions with this system, and where are the gaps for us? What's visible to us, what's not? And so you could think of this as an exercise in all of us collectively sort of making sense of the system that we have and our experiences of it in order to impact how we could design or redesign it. And I have a friend, John Bruce, who's done a ton of complex systems mapping, and he has a line that I love. He said, "All maps are wrong, never map alone." And so I'm showing you this with the understanding that it's iterative, and we need all of your feedback. along the way. So let me share this with you now. And I'll try to stay at the high level and let us move quickly into the other panelists. I know that they have a lot more detail to offer. So here you have
Tristan, I'm
Yep.
sorry. Just so you know, in the room with the people in the back, they cannot read any of the what's in the bubbles. So you will need to verbalize that.
Yep. So here, I'll just read the 4 big bubbles just so you know what is here as soon as I can find where my mouse went. There we go. So we have over here the employer-led recruitment and training. We have sort of the outsourcing of employer-driven training. Here we have capacity building for businesses and employees. And here we have the kind of network of business economic development oriented organizations. And in general, what we were thinking here is that, there are existing resources. There are clearly gaps, right? So we're looking at trying to understand visually and in dialogue where those are. And for me, I would say that notably absent from this map and these smaller circles are things like paid internships, apprenticeships around the internal organizational, or here we've got the Department of Economic Development Vermont training program affiliated with sort of employer-driven training, or CEWD at Vermont Tech, where these kinds of things, but noticeably absent from what I see is kind of a coherent, visible, accessible at all scales system to support recruitment. And something that goes beyond listing services, like a job portal or things like that. Now, there may be other examples that I'm not aware of at the moment that Cindy can share or others can share. So I'm not trying to sort of assert that there is nothing, but as we've talked to mostly right now to private sector folks, that isn't a very visible part of the experience of what they see when they think about the parts of the system that are oriented towards them. We do have quite a robust social and economic support network that actually overlaps substantially with the next kind of subset of the system that I'll show you, which is the individual job seeker pipeline. And in here, for those of you in the back, this is things like workforce demand studies. This is sort of the research, the people who are looking ahead, trying to understand where our economy is going, where our needs are going, and how we can identify sector-specific needs. So that's everything from McClure's Foundation's Promising Pathways. Vidal does a 2-year in-demand occupations, the Vermont Futures Project, the Vermont Talent Pipeline Project. So there's a bunch of different people trying to think about workforce and the future of workforce. In the Social Economic Support Network, you have AHS, Reach Up, Child Care Supports, workforce housing programs, programs targeting people who've been recently or previously incarcerated. There's a bunch of different ways that we programmatically support people and also economically. Navigators, this yellow circle, are folks who are trying to bridge this employer-employee connectors. And we have some of that in AHS. We have a whole bunch of nonprofit partners, Vermont Associates, Vermont Works for Women, at the educational level, guidance counselors, college career counselors, Advanced Vermont. A bunch of RDCs have programs and or people that are targeting this work. And Vidal does through the One Stop program, which Cindy, I'm guessing, may mention. I see a nod. And then finally, for the individual job seeker, I'm going to try to pinch to zoom here so I can zoom out a little bit. There's a whole bunch of work that's evolving around what happens sort of within the workplace and training that you can get as an individual, apprenticeships, badges, things like that. Non-degree credentials, more and more, we're trying systematically to look at non-degree credentials or stackable certificates as a way to grow and develop, and for that to be made much more explicit. And then you have a whole degree path where the sort of the validation of your achievement and your evolution is done through whether it's high school diploma, associates, bachelor's, master's, or other advanced degrees. And there are people who play the role of validating credentials, whether that's the State Workforce Board through its WIOA responsibilities, VSAC through how they fund and support non-degree grant programs. Unions often have programs recognizing certain kinds of skills and trainings, and VDOL again has a role here. And we have the educators and trainers. And I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to step back because I think it will be about time to hand it off to Cindy. But also this cultural values piece, we wanted this in here. And it may be a really rich place to talk as a group in the Q&A around how do we support culturally and in this systemic approach, the recognition that there is no one size fits all for any individual, that we need a system that no matter where people are coming from, whether it's, prison, extreme poverty with multiple barriers to work, or from, a college program or advanced training, or from an adult CTE, or from a K to 12 CTE program, that everybody can access and knows how to find the resources and programs that will allow them to flourish. And so this is, again, just that 30,000-foot view of something that is very complex, but we will want, and please invite your feedback around what seems familiar to you, what you've never even heard or didn't know existed, and how we can help make this system better and make it more visible and accessible for all of you. And with that, I will stop sharing, hand the screen. I know, Cindy, you're coming up next. I think I'm going to hand the host back to Ellen, though.
Yes.
And Ellen, you're in as
Thanks,
Kristen.
Yes.
All right.
Are you ready for me,
Thank
Ellen?
you.
Oh, no.
Just about. Give me just 2 seconds here. So let's see. How do I get it so that we can see Cindy speaking?
I don't think during her
presentation we can. Okay. All right. So Cindy Robillard is the Business Services Program Manager, Department of Labor. So she's going to run through a few slides. And Cindy, just tell me when you want me to advance them for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for having me. This is a really exciting gathering, and I'm so pleased to see that so many of you were able to be there in person. I wish I could have been, but and also thank you to Tristan and Ellen for really clearly and accurately outlining where we're at, because I couldn't agree more with all of the points that have been made. And I certainly couldn't agree more with the assessment of the workforce challenges that every employer across all industries face. It's not just Vermont either, we should say. I think this is a national challenge that is something that, at all levels of government is really being very closely researched and studied, just because we just need to understand how our future is going to look when it comes to the employment community. So my role with the Department of Labor is a fairly new role. Just about a month before we all kind of went in our scattered directions with COVID, I jumped into this position. And the goal or the main focus of my role is to provide support to businesses with a number of programs, but specifically our Wagner-Pizer program funding and our Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funding, which Tristan referred to. Those are federal funds that come in to support the kind of the workforce engine in the state of Vermont. So my role is to work with the employer-facing aspects of the Department of Labor's mission, which is really to match workers, individuals to jobs, and have employers be satisfied with the folks that are coming through their door and the workforce that they have access to. So one of the things that I thought I would break my remarks down into sort of 3 areas. Some of them are a little bit potentially repetitive, and I know that others will probably touch on them, but I think it's just a good reminder to know that the Department of Labor has these resources and services available. So especially for employers and businesses that are joined us today, hopefully there may be something that you haven't heard before. So our labor market information unit is busier probably than they have ever been, because people like Tristan and all the other folks that he mentioned are using the data that they're collecting, both the Vermont data and then also over that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the federal labor market information arm, and they're collecting information to really help policymakers, but also it's beneficial for businesses and employers to know that this exists. When it comes to, planning how your workforce looks, planning how how much your workforce costs, how your workforce gets trained, and the resources that are available. This vtlmi.info website is incredibly rich with information, and something that I really hope that people will take advantage of. For those of you who may not have ever had the opportunity to connect with him, we have a chief labor economist in Matt Berowitz, who is incredibly bright and capable and does so much to support all this work, but also does a great job of making it meaningful. And so, potentially he would have been a good guest for us today, because he might be able to kind of filter some of this information. But just know that this labor market information unit is an active and rich resource through the Vermont Department of Labor. I personally use it all the time. It's, we can slice it in lots of different ways by occupation, which is something that I've mentioned here on my slide. You're a business, you're looking to, get going, or you're looking to grow. And in order to do that, what you need to add to your workforce. And then what does that look like? What are the skills that you're going to need, or that these people are going to need? And then more importantly, potentially, what are you going to have to pay them? And how do you be competitive in doing that? Also, just some language that comes with, some of the occupational profiles, where you can really, look at a really clear profile and develop a good job description, have it align with, people that are also in the field and industry, and also align up and down in skill. So I just couldn't miss this opportunity to be here today and not give a good plug to our labor market information folks. So then the next thing to mention is recruitment assistance. And I couldn't agree more with Tristan's statement about, we really need to look at this differently, potentially, in order to have success. I think we're kind of in a place where we've had certain businesses and employers have had an approach to recruitment, and some have amazing success. And I guess we should really be able to better understand what it is that makes those that are successful do well, except for right now, I think everybody sort of collectively is sharing that it's not going great. So I think it's harder to find those studies and those in situations where we can really apply and do some checking on what is working. But I will say that when I took this job, the main focus that I was given was to increase the quality and quantity of jobs in our Vermont job link system. And so for those of you who are not familiar with it, the Department of Labor maintains a database, which is not unlike other databases like Indeed or other recruiting databases. It's the designated state workforce system. And, at times it's been clunky. I will say that. So a couple of things have happened. We have been part of, we're part of a multi-state collaborative group that contracts with an organization, the AJLA, American Job. I'm not going to get all those the letters right, but they basically are the creator and the maker of Vermont Job Link. In February of this year, we underwent an upgrade, which took months of planning and a lot of good back-end development. And I will say that Vermont Job Link is new, lean, mean, nicer, more friendly, easier to navigate. And so if it's something that you're familiar with from the past, and it's been a while since you've been involved in Vermont Job Link using it, I would encourage you to try it again and see what you think. So to that end, from about April of 2020 to sometime this summer, we basically have doubled the jobs that are posted in Vermont Job Link. And those jobs come in from basically 3 different ways. There are employers who establish national labor exchange accounts, and their corporate HR divisions are basically sharing information at a very high level through a data sharing system that happens. So it's very automated. Then we have employers who establish what we call self-service accounts. Self-service accounts can be managed independently by a business. They apply, their account is created, approved, there's an approval process. And there are ways that employer can post their job openings. There's some automation that is involved, that can be involved, or it can be done manually, but they're basically entering and maintaining their own account and their own postings. And then we have folks who use staff assisted, which is handled through a business services team, which is another thing that we have created since my position came on board, or since I took on this role. And basically what the business services team is throughout our job centers around the state, we have staff that are not fully dedicated, although we would love to have that, but are not fully dedicated to employer outreach and support, but their primary focus. They're trained and they're able to navigate the Vermont Job Link system and provide other services that are really specific to employers. So Vermont Job Link is the tool to use, and what we're being asked to do is keep it robust, keep it active, keep it up to date, so that there's one place that we can drive people and there's one place we can take information out of. So happy to chat down the road about Vermont Job Link. Other things, we certainly know that we need to promote, right? I mean, when it comes to, we have to tell the story of the amazing jobs, the amazing opportunities that are out there across industry, across occupation, all around the state. We have job fairs, both virtual and in person, that are happening, and we encourage employers, small and large, to participate. We've done some updating to our webpage. And so we have a highlighted employers page. And then we also are doing some direct mailing in the form of different weekly and even more than that, newsletters that go out to a database of around 20,000 job seekers. So increase the quality and quantity of jobs has not been a huge task, because there are a lot of jobs, but making the data available and meaningful to job seekers was the goal. And I think we have really done a pretty good job of that over recent months. And the final thing I wanted to mention was that we are, the other main mission that we have is to connect people to training opportunities. So again, we have some pots of funding for some folks who are eligible, and we can help them to connect to training programs that support different industries and support occupation. And one of the ways that's the best, and I did notice it on Tristan's slide too, and I think it's something that has been underutilized, but I know that we are really working with a team internally to create a process that is easier, accessible, and something that employers can really take advantage of, which is on-the-job training. And on-the-job training, again, for certain WIOA eligible individuals, is a way for businesses to work with our team, create a training outline, and then be reimbursed for some of the time that they spend training individuals that come into their business at an entry level without all the skills that are required, but they're a good fit, and otherwise make an awesome candidate, and and you're getting to train the person the way you want to train them. So OJT has a lot of potential, and I know that that's a real area of focus for us right now. I also want to just mention briefly, it's not my area of expertise. I know Maureen is coming up, and she's has a lot of experience with apprenticeship, but anytime we can help someone earn and learn as they go, we know there's a value in that, and there's a lot of interest, I know at the federal level, certainly at the state level, in trying to look for new apprenticeship opportunities throughout the state. So there's a list of eligible occupations that's been added here. And so basically, I think the takeaway about apprenticeship is, if you're looking to do some recruiting, you have some training that is going to need to happen, maybe it would be a good thing to explore whether apprenticeship is the right fit. And I think the timing for that is good right now. And then the other thing is, and I think this speaks to your involvement in the educational system. I think that was one of the points that Ellen made early on, and that is that internships and, being willing to provide learning opportunities for students, whether they're secondary students or post-secondary students, the return on your investment will be strong, because you will have individuals who now know a little bit about your operation. They now have established some basic connections to the way you operate, and in many cases, people cultivate, long-term employee-employee relationships out of those internship opportunities.
Great.
So, yeah, I think.
Thanks, Cindy.
Yep.
Sorry. Did you go on mute? We need to move along to Maureen, but thank you so much. There is a wealth of information on the Department of Labor website. And so in the packet that we're going to be sending out, we're going to try to make sure that all of these things have all the hyperlinks that are needed to make it really easy for you to find them, because on all big websites, it can be difficult. And we're going to have Q&A at the end. So Cindy, I'm hoping you're staying on for the Q&A portion as well, because I'm sure there'll be some questions. But we'll need to move along to Maureen Hebert now, who's the Associate Dean of Industrial Relations and Workforce Development at Vermont Tech. So Maureen, you want to?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
There you are.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we're good.
Great, okay. So at Vermont Technical College, we have traditionally, I think people are pretty aware of our degree programs. We have a 99% job placement rate across industry sectors. So we've been awarded the status of best in Vermont for return on investment for our degree programs, but we also have a very robust continuing ed and workforce development division that is statewide. We currently serve over 3,200 Vermonters annually. Again, across industry sectors, and we work with hundreds of employers. Our mission really is to provide career-focused technical and professional education, which prepares students for immediate workplace success and continued learning. And we really value that role in supporting the Vermont economy and meeting the needs of industry and business by preparing highly qualified individuals in high-growth, high-wage occupations that really are the key economic drivers for our state. And on this slide here, which probably may be hard to see in the back, but you can see some of the opportunities that we have. So we offer both incumbent worker training, which is customizable, as well as stackable and a pathway to degree programs. So depending on where our employer partners need particular skill sets or competencies, we can build a program, or we may already have an existing program that works for their needs. And we have some examples of that have been long running, including our advanced manufacturing apprenticeship program with GE. We have a long running program with GS Precision. And recently, well, in the last 2 years, established an apprenticeship program with Global Foundries, where they're hiring high school grads right out of high school, putting them in a cohort with incumbent workers and providing education and training to get them up to speed to be a technician, and then offering them tuition funding so they can continue to get their associate's degree. So that's been a long running model for us. We've also found that because we have a lot of small employers in Vermont, the cohort model has been very effective. So you may have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 employers that decide that they want to get together and run a training. And we can use resources like Department of Labor funding or Vermont Training Program funding to help support that. Next slide, please. Sorry. So we've been across industry sectors, as I mentioned. So we provide apprenticeship type programs as well as designated Department of Labor apprenticeship programs across the state, as well as industry recognized credentials. The programs now in apprenticeship, we have currently 600 students in plumbing and electrical statewide. And there's about 34 classes across the state. That's a 4-level program. We have about 100 students in advanced manufacturing, and that includes CNC machining, as well as SolidWorks and CAD training. We are a NIMS certified provider, so we can provide the testing for that, and that's for CNC credentialing. We also offer an LPN apprenticeship program in partnership with CVMC and Brattleboro Memorial Hospital. And we just got approved to do an aviation maintenance, airframe maintenance program for several partners in the state. So that's repairing planes. And we currently work with the Vermont ski industry to partner on the related instruction for tramway maintenance, which are the ski lift operators, basically. And that currently has about 44 students statewide. The other thing that we currently offer is really customizable one-off training per se. So if a company needs a certain skill set, they've hired a new person, or they want to create a pipeline to employment within their organization, we can offer non-credit bearing courses as well as credit bearing. And we have several employer partners that we work with, or several hundred actually, across the state, and including border communities in New Hampshire and New York and Massachusetts. We currently work with the career and tech ed centers around the state as well, with the adult learning programs and with the high school students through dual enrollment, through work-based learning opportunities. We also do career exploration opportunities. This summer, we were able to start that up again, despite COVID. We have a partnership with VTrans to run the NSTI, National Summer Transportation Institute, which really focuses on STEM and transportation careers, and that includes engineering. And we had about 13 students from across the state participate in that program. We work very closely with organizations like Vermont Works for Women. We were a Rosie Girls campsite. We didn't offer it this summer, unfortunately, because we couldn't do an overnight camp. But we also work with corrections, Voc Rehab. We have a current grant that we're working with them to expand apprenticeship opportunities for their constituents. We work with Vermont Learning, Adult Learning, as well as other ABEs across the state, and have a partnership now with the National ABE organization and IBM to offer micro-credentials. So those are, again, stackable. We can also do assessment of prior learning for students that are coming to us with other training opportunities. Upcoming, we hope to have additional apprenticeship programs, but we currently have training programs in these: vet assistant, dental assistant, solar installer, HVAC, and fiber broadband installer. So those have been typically training programs that we offer, but we're exploring apprenticeship options, which, as Cindy mentioned, is really a great recruitment and retention tool. That learn and earn model is really attractive for people that are looking for a career change or new graduates that are looking to get into an organization or an industry sector, but for a variety of reasons can't afford post-secondary or don't feel like they're ready for a post-secondary option. So it's really meeting those learners where they're at and helping them to succeed and grow confidence so that they can continue on if that's something that they want to do. And that's why we build our programs so they have pathways to degree options. UVM and CCV to help provide other opportunities. We also work very closely with VMEC, Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center, and we're really excited to announce that we have, and I'll put this in the chat, we have the new manufacturing collaborative that's coming on board very soon. We just got a 5-axis CNC machine, which is pretty amazing, and I'm excited to see it in action. It's not quite ready for prime time yet, but it also, that lab will also have additive manufacturing capabilities. So that's coming soon. We also have a mobile lab for manufacturing and CNC machining, as well as a full lab in Williston, our campus in Williston. And we partner with the River Valley Tech Center to access their manufacturing lab as well. So I think these partnerships are really critical, and I just wanted to emphasize that piece of the work that we do. We are a small state and we are scalable in terms of opportunities, and it really is important to collaborate and work together. Organizations like Advanced Vermont are trying to really coalesce those resources, Vermont Talent Pipeline, some of the others that have been mentioned. And the more I think we work together, the better we can serve Vermont. Oh, and sorry, I had one last slide too, Ellen. These are 2 programs that I wanted to let folks know about that really relate to this industry. And Molly, my colleague, is going to be talking later, but we have an industrial maintenance apprenticeship program and an advanced manufacturing program that includes CNC machining that are running now. The advanced manufacturing program is running out of Springfield and Williston, and will soon be out of Randolph as well. But these might be very applicable to your industry sector. If you're interested, these are grant funded currently.
Great, thank you. That's really terrific. All right, and you mentioned a lot of these people that are organizations, so I think we're in good shape there. So thank you so much, Maureen. And now we're going to move on to Jen Stromson to wrap it up before we take Q&A. And I'm sorry. Yes, I think so.
How does that sound to people out in the world?
I can't.
It's okay. I'm going to try not to repeat things, so forgive me if I pause periodically to try to skip over stuff that I think you covered beautifully. I am Jen Stromson. I'm Director of Programs at the Regional Development Corporation, at a Regional Development Corporation. I'm not the head of the Regional Development Corporation, that's Fred Kinney. I want to just make sure everyone understands what an RDC is. There are 12 RDCs. We cover every single region of Vermont. Sometimes we're commingled with the Regional Planning Commission, so you know us, in that way. And sometimes we're not. In Brattleboro, we are a standalone entity. One of the ways that folks know us is they know us through, we're kind of boots on the ground for a lot of state programs. So if you're an employer and you would like to use the Vermont training program, often, we're at the table, we kind of have those relationships with employers, and we know that that's a good program for you, and that's what you need. You're taking on some new people who need a certain set of skills. And so we kind of, I wouldn't say we broker that because John Young from the state is fabulous, but we kind of help figure out how to prioritize, and we help people through some of that paperwork. That's one example. Another example of what regional development corporations do, again, we tend to be really kind of in tune with what the business environment and employer environment is. So we come from that perspective. It's not so much from sort of the people side of things usually. We can help put together interesting collaborations. And so, for instance, the previous speaker mentioned the GS Precision collaboration with Vermont, with VTC. BDCC, my RDC, was really on the ground floor of that. So we were helping do an industrial expansion and New Market Tax Credit growth project for them, and part of that was expanding their training school. And so we're sort of part of that conversation about how to fund that expanded workforce training school. And another example is Brattleboro Memorial Hospital needed more medical assistance, and we helped with Community College of Vermont and BTC ultimately, I think, develop sort of that partnership, and then we kind of step away. So one way to think about us is sort of navigators and facilitators, because we kind of know the workforce systems, we know the players, and employers can't possibly keep up without all that all the time. So we kind of run a little bit of an in-between relationship there. One of the things, so I'm not going to read these things because y'all can read slides and you're going to get them afterwards. But I think if you want to go to the next one, yeah. One of the ways to think to how we think about all of you is we're thinking about sort of the system that you're a part of. So we're thinking about the entire sector. When I look at workforce issues, I'm thinking about skills and transferable skills, right? So if you're looking for people in, that have mechanical skills, I'm thinking, well, where else are you going to get those people? They're going to be working, maybe for mechanics, maybe they're working actually in manufacturing or something like that. And so this kind of pretty rainbow diagram is just one way that I just wanted to illustrate that when we think about the workforce side of this, we're thinking about all those skills and how to sort of map across industries. With such a limited workforce, we have to really think creatively about who's out there and what they bring to the table, but also what are the missing skills in there. At the bottom left, which also, again, you can just read at home at your leisure when you get these slides, the point there was that when I look at the entire forest industry and value-added wood sector, it really, the blue part is production jobs, right? So I think of all of you as part of kind of a bigger sector where, we have a workforce needs that cut across those, right? And so that's just to give you sort of my idea. I'm going to go to the next slide. One of the things again, I'm not going to read these, it's sort of a list of things that RDCs do, but one of the things that the RDCs did prior to COVID was partner with the Vermont Department of Labor, and we put on, I think it was 11 workforce summits around the state. And what those were convenings of providers and also of employers. And part of that was to really get at a lot of what you saw in that mapping is at the regional level, where are the gaps, where are the silos, and how do we make sure everybody knows about each other a little bit more? We had groups of providers where even the corrections folks who absolutely know how to take care of the people they're trying to transition to the workforce really well didn't actually know all of the other providers that had programs available there, even in our region. And that's just, common. We're all kind of working in our silos. So there were some findings out of that. A lot of these things have been covered, but I just wanted to just kind of name the prioritized findings from the Regional Development Commission Corporation Summit, which were encouraging local employers to spend more time in high schools and colleges and to really work to help students understand what their options are after graduation. So, as employers in Windham County, we have a program in the high schools. And so, we've taken busloads of kids to go see Sir Sosimo and to really, and to understand like what the opportunities are there, because they may hear forestry and think chainsaw. They don't understand they can operate this cool robotics thing that moves logs around, that there's all this other stuff going on. There's engineering involved. And so we're really trying to help employers show kids sort of the depth of opportunities and the breadth of opportunities, the occupations in these sectors, and that nothing works better than them just kind of getting onto your work site. Educating guidance counselors, networking, with the service providers. So as much time as you can spend to make sure that all your folks out there, the colleges, everyone knows what you do and what kinds of skills you need. Educating parents, getting yourself in the news as much as possible. And then some of the recommendations were around developing industry-specific consortiums. So shout out to what's happening here, because it's sort of exactly what we're saying there's a need for more of. And then this is just a map of, that was just a map of sort of like where the jobs are the most dense in the county. But yeah, so the missing link really is, frankly, just people. I mean, that's the reality. And so I'm just showing you kind of the labor force drop on the left, which is at the state level, and then on the right, that's in Windham County. And so part of what I'm trying to illustrate here is not just my personal problem in my job, but I'm trying to illustrate that because of sort of relatively okay population growth in Chittenden County, it kind of masks how serious our labor shortage is in some of the rural areas. And that has to do with a number of things, colleges and urban churn, but also, just Wyndham County is older than Chittenden County overall, and older people don't have kids. And so this is something we really pay a lot of attention to. And you know, what I really kind of, the title of the last slide was that your workforce supply equals people plus pipeline. And the point of this today is really focus on the pipeline. But I really just want to say, we have to focus on the people. If we don't have more people to put in the pipeline, it really doesn't matter how good your pipeline is. And we can focus on workforce participation rate, but, you know, I'm a strong believer that we just, at a certain point, you know, unemployment is just gonna get back to a pretty low rate because we don't have the people here in Vermont. And so one of the things I kind of want to say about the forest sector pipeline, that they're very specific to it. It is made, I don't have to tell you this, but I'm going to say this out loud. You already know this, right? It's made up largely of scattered small employers across the state. There's been some consolidation, but it's still a lot of small employers. And there's not really a history of a pipeline. I think like CDL drivers, like a lot of manufacturing, in the past, unlike the trades, in the past, the pipeline of the skills was like in family-owned businesses. It was on farms. It was kind of an informal pipeline. So more than other sectors, I think this sector is really working from scratch. And that's just a fact we have to face and kind of be very aggressive about this. I think another thing is just, you know, we have mostly small firms. That means who here has an HR person, right? Like nobody, right? So it's just really important, coming back to like how to lean on the regional development corporations is, you know, we can be your friends, and there are lots of folks in those bubbles who can be your friends to help you do the work of building an in-house training, figuring out how to do on-the-job training and use that program. So you kind of have to reach out and have people do the work that a GE has someone in-house who can do that. GS Precision in-house has someone in-house who can help build that system. You're going to really have to lean on your external partners to do that. So what I think I'm really trying to say is, like, really have to ask for help. So don't be afraid. You can go to the next slide. I wanted to just sort of end by really focusing back on this issue of not having enough people, and but also some opportunities. You know, as Tristan showed at the beginning, this is a tough market for employers. It's a great market for employees. It's a time of great opportunity and change. And these are some data points that actually relate specifically to the forestry and value-added wood sector. I was comparing the blue donuts, compare the national workforce to the Vermont workforce. And the sort of lighter blue is white workers. And so in Vermont, this is a predominantly white field. And in the rest of the country, the workforce that's available is a little bit less white. And we have to really ask ourselves, are we ready for the people we need? And how do we get ready for the people we need, right? And that's something that is true across all sectors. It looks very similar in healthcare. You know, that the reality is that the workforce out in America that we all need is younger and it's more diverse, and but they're out there. And I think the solution is largely going to come from outside of Vermont. Again, old people don't have babies, thank God. Then the other thing that's in here is just sort of this, like, you know, red alert for the retirement problem. You know, this unpacks a little bit of why we're seeing that labor force drop off. That yellow and the gold is your workers from 45 to 64, right? So these are folks who are really on the brink of retirement. And that's just what your sector looks like. And it's a little bit worse than the average, but it's about on point for Vermont. But down below, this is sort of the gross regional product, which is like GDP for the state, really. And that's your sector. I mean, this is a sector that is, you know, as Ellen pointed out, I mean, there's a lot of demand for the products, and despite supply chain and employment problems, you know, this is a great area of opportunity for young people. They can kind of get the word out and build a pipeline, you know, kind of sky's the limit. So I'm going to end on
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So technically speaking, we were supposed to end in 4 minutes, but we need to have some questions because we had a lot of content that we just covered. So I'm hoping that we can take a little bit of time and do some Q&A. And yeah, actually, I just stop the screen share, and then that will take care of that, right? All right. So, so thank you to our panelists. A lot of ground covered there. So if folks have the ability to turn their cameras on, it'd be really nice to see you at this point. We'll take your questions for any of our panelists for right now. And anything that you're burning that might fit better into the next panel, we'll ask you to hold those questions for then. So anything for Tristan, Maureen, Cindy, or Jen?
On Zoom, either put a question in the chat. Brett can let us know if there's a question, and then, or raise your hand. And in the room, just raise your hand. Oh, Lucas.
Wait, hit this button.
Yeah, I think so.
Hello. My question is, so I believe that everyone that spoke mentioned in some way or another a lack of people. And my question is the state of Vermont doing anything to market the employment needs that we have as a state outside of the state? I'm thinking about the program that the governor offered, which was the $10,000 for people to move to Vermont and work remotely. This was prior to the pandemic, but that was not people to come here and work in our businesses. That was people to come here and work at their businesses somewhere else, but live in Vermont. And I think a lot of this influx of people that has come into Vermont as the pandemic is people that are coming here but are working for companies outside of the state somewhere else. And my question is, is there a marketing program being developed by the state to tell the world what a wonderful place Vermont is and how many jobs that we have here for you to come and do?
I'll take the first shot at that.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so yes, there is general state marketing efforts to promote Vermont as a great place to live, work, and visit. And, maybe in a different order than that. But I'll go back to the overarching problem here, which is that, there doesn't tend to be that much moving between, regions in general. But also we are not at the moment seeing major increases in migration, and the job crisis across sectors is not just in Vermont, it's everywhere. So if you think about New England for instance, as the place where New England, New York, the Northeast as the place we're most likely to get people moving from, they're all facing the same thing across all of their sectors. And so for Vermont to try to get its voice, its market, its message through in a marketplace where you're competing with New York or Massachusetts and the kind of budget investments that they can make in marketing, very, very hard for us to do. So we do it, but that is, if we did 10 times what we currently do, it probably wouldn't meaningfully show up for most of you in anything on the ground, because of those macro trends of other states needing it as well.
Yeah. So, Marianne? I think it'll actually help. Yeah.
Kristen, this is Marianne. Don't we have a program that the legislature helps design that has certain specific roles that we're willing to, to give money, $7,500?
Yeah, but it's a drop in the bucket of the need is all. And so I apologize for sounding a little bleak about it. Yes, we do have things, but the number of $7,500 grants that can go relative to the needs that are there across sectors is not enough to really fundamentally alter the macro trends. And it's, to be honest, that's why I'm in the House. The House didn't see that as the highest leverage investment. The Senate did, and it was a compromise, and the governor agreed with the compromise. But it's not necessarily going to really fundamentally change these macro patterns. We have to, and I saw Maureen also mention we have a housing issue where we're trying to recruit from out of state. That's absolutely true. Like we have some systemic challenges that that we need to address. I live in Brattleboro. The rental housing, it's less than 1/4 or 0.5% right now. So if you want to move to Brattleboro to take one of the great jobs that are here, it's almost impossible to find a place to live in Brattleboro. Now, I think that there are other places in the state where that's different. So what the sector specific kind of collaboration I think opens up for us is, what could we find different ways, for instance, to support your sector with targeted efforts to attract people who know or are interested in what your sector has to offer? And can we support you in figuring out how you make your jobs more attractive to people who might be weighing different options that you wouldn't normally have been having to compete with in the past? Learning how to sort of build that into your business models so that you're more competitive in the out in the market for the talent that is out there.
Great, thanks, Tristan. So Colleen, I see had her hand up, and then we'll go to John, and then over here in the room if there's more. So Colleen, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question or offer what you're going to offer.
I didn't really have my hand, but this is all very interesting, and some mill that we can't fill, and sharing this reaching conversation.
Great, thank you so much. All right, John Young from Department of Economic Development. Go ahead, sir.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everybody. John Young, I direct the Vermont training program. But just a little bit of insight from some of the employer feedback I get on basically them trying to recruit outside. And I think one of the things we need to sort of address or to try to strategize around is that we just don't have the sector densities. So if somebody's going to come from Connecticut or Massachusetts and take a big leap to move to one of our rural areas for a position, without the sector density in that area, it's a bigger risk for them to do that. So I think, it'd be interesting Vermont-wise if we look at that sort of problem, not that we're going to solve it, but how can we help alleviate that fear of moving to a rural area in Vermont when there's just not the density that these workers need in case their primary job doesn't work out.
Great point. Thanks, John. That's very helpful. One more question, and we'll move on to panel 2. Good?
Can I just say something?
Oh, yeah. Please, Maureen, yeah.
I just wanted to mention too, and maybe someone has more insight, but there were efforts to relocate or encourage new Americans to move to Vermont. And I think that is an opportunity if we can find housing, certainly for that group of folks.
Great. Yep, great point. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our panelists.